What's up, cooks? Welcome to the Card Kitchen. I am the Card Chef, and today we are cooking up a tier list, and the tier list is going to be the top decks in the game, or actually pretty much all the decks. The list I have here, it isn't broken down into each and every single deck, but it does compile all versions of a deck in certain cards. I will go through them. I will rank them. I'll keep it as S, A, B, C, and D. And the S tier will be reserved for the best decks in the game. The A tier will be reserved for decks that are right on the cusp of possibly being the best. They see a lot of tops. They do win tournaments, but they just aren't the top three, so I'm not going to be putting them in an S tier. B are decks that are tournament viable, but don't seem to really have broken that barrier in regards to actually being able to win tournaments, or even if they have, they've been one-off times that they've actually won. C is reserved for decks that are kind of decent, have done well in tournaments, but basically have just fallen off, but are better than the standard rogue decks, like these off meta decks that people still bring to tournaments, which is completely fine, but absolutely have no chance of winning. But so these C decks do have a chance of winning, but rarely do. And then the D is for those rogue decks that barely ever win. So I am going to start, I'm just going to go in order here, and I'm going to start with Aerodactyl. And Aerodactyl decks, I guess we can talk about all of them. There's the Farfetch version, the Primate version, and then certain ones that tech in things like Mew EX, and I think they're all really ranked around the same. They all have a very similar win rate, so I don't mind putting them, like compiling them all together and putting them in a deck together here. And I'm actually gonna put this in A. I think this will end up at the bottom of A. I think it's good enough to be considered A. I don't think it's actually won a tournament yet, though, if I'm being completely honest, which makes me want to put it in B, but I do think it's super duper strong. And being able to play Hitmonlee and Marshadow in your deck, those decks right now, anything playing those is really, really, really good. So I am going to put it in A, but I do think it'll end up near the bottom of A, if I'm being completely honest with you. And then we got Alakazam here. Alakazam, I'm going to put in D. I think it's definitely a rogue deck, an off-meta cook that I don't think is really viable in tournament play, to be completely honest. It does have a really awesome psychic attack. I think there's just better cards that do it. You have Jinx, which is fine enough. It's a basic. You don't have to play it in more than one copy. Alakazam is a build-around card, and I don't think it works as a build-around card. That at least the psychic attack doesn't work as a build-around card. So I'm going to put it in D. And then this is Arcanine. Arcanine, Moltres, and Mew EX is the deck I'm talking about when we're talking about Arcanine. And this is going to go in A, and I'm actually going to put it above the Aerodactyl decks. This deck wins more tournaments than the Aerodactyl. Again, I don't think I've ever seen an Aerodactyl deck actually win a tournament, at least not like one with 250 or more people. As crazy as this deck is and the amount of cards you can fit into tech in and have this like tech box style deck, I think Arcanine has just proven that it still wins tournaments, and therefore I have to rank it above the Aerodactyl decks. And then Articuno. So this I'm going to consider as 18 trainer, and I am going to put it in D. I don't know. I think I'll put it above Alakazam here. It's definitely a rogue deck. It's definitely like a beginner deck, but you would be surprised how often, if you ever bring this back to ladder, if you haven't done it for a while, you would actually be surprised how often you do win and how often you do get that lucky Misty roll. It's kind of crazy, to be honest, but it's just a rogue deck. But I will put it above just because it seems like such an easy deck to play, and it's like it's basically a ladder deck. That's another way to look at D. It feels more like a ladder deck than anything else. Blaine is going to go into C. It's one of those decks that is good in tournaments, but not really good enough to consider it like a B, A, or S tier. Definitely not S tier. It has won tournaments before. It has seen a lot of tops in the past. I haven't seen it top a lot recently in the last couple of weeks. I think it's just one of those decks that you come in with, and if you have good matchups, it does really well. It could be super duper aggressive, but I just think it's a C tier deck. Blastoise decks, this is going to be one of the harder ones, I think, because it feels like a Blaine's deck, but I feel like it's way better into the meta than anything else. So I'm actually going to put Blastoise in B tier. Blastoise Ruddigon is really good, and I think it's way underplayed, so I am going to put it in a B tier. It does see tops, and it has won tournament, so I am going to put it in the B tier. Brock deck. So this I'm going to consider. So we have Brock and we have Golem down here. So as a pure Brock deck, I'm going to put it in like an Onyx build of the deck. I'm going to put in a ladder. I think it's more of a ladder deck than anything, and therefore it's just considered a D deck. Now Celby, so we have Celby and Exeggutor here. We'll look at both of them at the same time. I'm going to consider Exeggutor as the Celby Exeggutor with 2 Exeggutor EX, and then I'm going to refer to Celby as the Celby Superior with only 1 Exeggutor EX, and then the other Exeggutor being the baby Exeggutor. And I think there's a significant difference. I actually absolutely believe Exeggutor Celebi is at the top of A. If I'm being completely honest, it has one of the highest win rates in the game. It has won multiple tournaments, and it's significantly higher. Not is it only one of the highest win rates in the game, but it's significantly higher than any Celebi deck that doesn't play 2 copies of Exeggutor EX, which is this one here, and I'm going to put this in B. This version that doesn't run 2 Exeggutor EX only runs about a 48% win rate. The last top 10 meta report, actually, I should say, that I did, this deck actually won a tournament, but its matchups were extremely good for it, and so I think that helped it a lot. But a deck that runs a 48% win rate compared to a 54% win rate is just that huge of a difference, that huge of a jump. It definitely belongs in B compared to the one that plays 2 Exeggutor EX. So Centiskorch. I'm not even really sure what Centiskorch decks are. I'm assuming it's just like a Moltres build that replaces Arcanine with Centiskorch, and this is definitely D tier. This is definitely a ladder deck, a off meta cook that people would try to test with more than anything. But I don't think you just go with the Arcanine. I don't think it's C. I definitely think it's more like just keep it on ladder. That's where it should be. I would even put it, honestly, I'll put it at the top of D, only because it does feel like the Arcanine Charizard deck just replaced with Centiskorch, which means it's probably pretty strong for like standard ladder when you're playing other off-meta cooks. Probably one of the better versions of all the D tier decks, to be honest. And then Charizard. Let's see here. Do we have a Moltres down here? No, we don't, right? So this would have to be considered. I'm going to have to consider this the Charizard Arcanine build instead of the pure Charizard build because we just don't have the card to do it. And in that case, it's definitely going to be A tier. I'm going to have to put it here in front of Arcanine. It has a little bit higher of a win rate, and it probably has around a similar finish rate. Become in first place is what I mean by that. Like a win in tournaments, probably wins around the same amount of tournaments as Arcanine, but it does have a bit of a higher win rate, about a 1% higher win rate. I actually like the Arcanine EX build a lot better without Charizard. I find having that many Pokemon and then that many EX Pokemon in one deck is just way too bulky in a Charizard deck, but the data does show that it is a little bit better in the win rate, and they do, I feel, win around the same amount of tournaments, still as often as each other. Dragonite, unfortunately, like I almost want to put it in C with Blaine, but it's definitely not. I will put Dragonite. It's really tough. This is actually probably the hardest tier to do, to be honest. Like, which one of these? I might redo these at the end. I'll just put stuff in, and then I'll reorganize them if I think they need to be reorganized. Gengar. Gengar has recently seen a couple of tops, but they're so rare and so few and far between. It's really hard to say. I still don't think he's there. I could put him in C with Blaine. But I don't know, man. I think he's D. I still think it's just not there yet. I'll have to... No, I think he's D. I don't know where in D, but I think he's going to have to be put in D. And we're definitely just going to have to maybe reevaluate that. We'll look back at that. Greninja. Okay, this is Greninja, Farfetch'd, Marshadow, and Hitmonlee. This deck actually has the highest win rate in the entire game. However, I haven't seen it win a ton of tournaments. I have seen it win tournaments, that version, and I've also seen the Tauros build with Druddigon win as well. I don't think we have a separate deck for that. I will compile them together. This is definitely A. It has, because it's the highest win rate in the game and it has won tournaments, I feel like I have to put it here. I don't see it top as often as these other decks or win as other decks. So I am going to put it here, even though it has one of the highest, if not the highest win rate in the game. I am going to put it below because I just, the amount of times you see these decks win tournaments and then the amount of times I see Aerodactyl top but never win is kind of crazy. So it's like this deck has a higher win rate, but then this one tops more, and I don't know, it's hard to rank when they have those types of differences. Like sometimes you want to put the win rate higher, but sometimes you want to put the deck that tops more. But it could also top more because more people are playing it, right? So that is a different thing. I think, honestly, these decks are so similar. Yeah, okay, I actually am going to put Greninja higher because these decks are so similar. They both play like that text box package of Marshadow, Hitmonlee, and Farfetch'd, and because this one has a higher win rate, I have no choice. I have to put it. These just don't win as often. Tournaments don't win tournaments as often as these other guys, so I am going to keep it in this order. I do like this order for A tier right now. Gyarados. So Gyarados is the first deck we are going to put in S tier. I think it's super duper strong. It's like a super enhanced version of Charizard EX, meaning that it's that one deck that can one-shot pretty much every single deck, with Druddigon and Greninja giving you those specific breakpoints that you need to hit for one shot with 140 damage from Gyarados. It's just super duper strong. It obviously has its cons. I don't think it's going to be the first deck. In fact, I know it won't be. I already know my S tier, but we'll get to them as we go along. Koga. So this is going to be, so there's a couple of builds here. So we have Arbok, we have Scolipede, and we have Koga. I think we'll wait to see how I want to consider these decks. I think Scolipede will be the Scolipede Weezing deck. Arbok, I will consider Arbok and Pidgeot. And then Koga, I'll consider Arbok and Weezing. So how about we do it like that? Machamp, I think it's easily a D tier. It's not, I don't think it's viable in the meta at all, to be honest. I think if anything, the fighting decks you want to be playing are obviously the Aerodactyl decks. The Machamp decks that you would see kind of feel like the Golem deck, but honestly the Golem deck's probably just better. In fact, I'm going to put Golem in C right now since we just grabbed it. It's what I feel like it's on the level of Blaine in standard format, to be honest. It did have a humongous win in an 1,800 person tournament, and then it saw a bunch of tops the following week, but then it completely dropped off. So I think it's still one of those decks that's pretty strong, but is just no longer viable to really be reliable to get you in the top. So you know what? I'm actually going to put Blastoise down. I think C is one of those decks that's really, really strong, but isn't reliable enough often enough to get you a top. This deck will still see a lot of tops, but has a very low win rate compared to the rest of the other decks and rarely wins tournaments. So Marowak. I think any Marowak build is just, again, when you're talking about fighting decks, you just have better decks that, fighting decks that are much better than it. I don't think Marowak is reliable anymore now that you have a 2 energy attacker for 80 damage. Yes, you can high roll with your Marowak, but I think Marowak is easily D tier. I don't think you should ever be bringing Marowak to a tournament, in my opinion. So Melmetal. Melmetal is the version I'm going to be talking about is a combination of 2 decks. It's going to be the Druddigon Mew EX build or the Druddigon Greninja build. I think it's a pretty solid substitute to a Gyarados EX in a Druddigon Greninja package. It does 120 damage with the Drud and the Greninja. 1 attack or 1 free value of damage from each of them is an additional 40 damage total. So that's 160 damage. I actually do like it. It's going to be C. I think it's I think you could bring this to tournaments and see success. I just don't think it's reliable enough to get you in to tops, to be completely honest. And we might fix this up a little bit because I do feel like Melmetal and Blastoise is like way better than Blaine and Golem. So these might move back up, to be honest. But we'll see when we get there. Pidgeot. To me, honestly, it's pretty good. It just feels like a weaker version. Like if you're playing it, you're most likely playing it with Druddigon, or you're playing it with like the tech box style with Farfetch'd and Hitmonlee. I don't know. It feels like one of those decks as well, where it's like it feels like Gengar, where like yes, it sees those niche tops, but it also feels like it's more reliable than Blaine. I'm going to put this in C. I think it's good. I just don't think it's that good. I think if you're going to be playing a Pidgeot Druddigon, you might as well just play Gyarados. And if you're going to be playing a Pidgeot Tech Box style, you're better off just playing these ones. So I don't think it's worth... I don't think it's worth playing, to be honest. Mewtwo. Mewtwo is absolutely S tier. Okay, it has one of the highest meta shares. It has only about a 50% win rate, but it has one of the highest meta shares because it's one of the strongest decks in the game, and it has one of the best turbo packages in the entire game because you have Mythical Slab. When you combine Mythical Slab with things like Pokeball, Professor's Research, and possibly a one of Siglif, I think is how you say it. You just turbo into all your combo pieces as quickly as possible. You get Gardevoir online super fast because of all those cards. You get your Mewtwo on the bench or onto the active spot, and they're able to ramp all those energies from Gardevoir onto the Mewtwo as quickly as possible. It's just too strong not to put in S tier. Pikachu EX is not just, it's not in B, I'm just trying to scroll up, is absolutely not only S tier, but absolutely the best deck in the game. It is so strong. Pikachu Substrika build specifically, if I had like Raichu down here, oh, we do have Raichu, so Surge, so we will talk about, Jesus Lord, love a duck. Apologies for that. Something fell down. Pikachu EX, the Zebstrika build, is by far the best Pikachu build and is by far the best best deck in the game, in my opinion. It's super duper fast. It's super duper reliable and consistent. It's a direct counter to Gyarados EX, and it absolutely wins the most tournaments, more than any other deck in the game. I think S tier, top of S tier, best deck in the game by far. We'll talk about Surge right away. Surge is going to go into B. It does still have a pretty decent win rate. I think it's around 52%. But it does not top as often as it used to. It's not even close to the Pikachu Zebstrika build. And so I just don't think it's worth putting in A at all. I think if you take any one of these decks in A, you have a way higher chance of winning a tournament or topping than you do Pikachu Raichu build. Starmie EX, I think Starmie EX has completely fallen off, but I still think it's B tier, to be honest. It's just Starmie. I'm going to consider this like Starmie Articuno or Starmie Greninja, to be honest. I think you can even consider this Articuno Greninja if you want, because all three of those decks, Starmie Articuno, Articuno Greninja, and Starmie Greninja, those three different decks, they all have still pretty good and decent win rates, over 50%. They do still see tops and they still have a very good win rate, but I don't think they're reliable enough to ever get you a win in a tournament at this point, especially since there's just better versions of these decks going around and better decks than it. Venusaur is absolutely a rogue deck in my opinion. It's D. I don't know where it is on D. I'm going to redo D completely at one point, but I don't think Venusaur is viable. I think for a while in Genetic Apex, people thought it was viable. It did win a tournament, but I think we quickly figured out that it was not that good. I'm going to put Wigglytuff down here with these guys because Wigglytuff really feels like the Wigglytuff Weezing deck or Wigglytuff Arbok. Like there's Weezing Arbok, and then there was decks that teched in 1/1 lines of Wigglytuff. So I'll consider this Koga Wigglytuff, and then this Arbok Weezing, this Arbok Pidgeot, and then this the Scolipede version. Florges, I played Florges. I had fun with it. It wasn't that great of a deck, to be honest. I don't think Florges has its. I think this will probably stay at the bottom, to be completely honest. I just don't think it's that great. So Marshadow, okay, so cool. Marshadow is on here. So this is going to be considered. I'm going to put this here. This is basically the same deck as Aerodactyl, but no Aerodactyl. So it's pretty much 2 Marshadow, 2 Hitmonlee, and 2 Farfetch'd. Sorry, you're not on the screen. It's pretty much 2 Marshadow, 2 Hitmonlee, and 2 Farfetch'd. And it's actually pretty good. It's honestly, you just remove the Aerodactyl. The Aerodactyl is really good in a couple situations. Obviously, you get to stop Pokemon from evolving if that is in effect, and you have an additional attacker to do 80 damage for just 2 energy. But I think, honestly, if you just play the single prize version with no EX Pokemon, at Marshadow at 2 and Hitmonlee at 2 and Farfetch'd at 2, it's a super duper good deck. And it's one of the few decks like Greninja, Aerodactyl, and Marshadow. These all feel like a tech box deck with Marshadow and Hitmonlee in it. And obviously Farfetch'd as well sometimes. But this is really the only version I think that actually reliably plays 2 of Marshadow and 2 of Hitmonlee, so you increase your chances of really having those things online for you. Amistar, I think any Amistar deck, to be honest, is D. I don't know where it is in D. We'll redo it. Okay, let's get into Dark. The Dark decks. So, Scolipede Weezing. I just did a video talking about how this is the most overrated deck in the meta right now. I think people still think this deck is really good. I honestly don't. I just don't think it's good. Not for tournament play. I am going to put it in C. I do think this is... If you brought Scolipede, and I made a point to say that if you brought Scolipede to ladder, you would probably do very, very well. Like really, really good. Like honest to God, I think it's reliable. I think it can get you 5 wins in a row for your win streak. I think you bring it to a tournament and it just gets crushed, if I'm being honest. I don't think it's that great. The data shows it's completely overrated, considering like it has a decent enough meta share to show us that people are still playing it and still think it's very, very good. For tournament play, I do not think so at all. Even though Mewtwo EX has the highest meta share, I still don't think Scolipede is worth playing, but it does get tops, whereas these ones at the bottom will basically never see tops, to be honest with you. And then Arbok. This will be Pidgeot Arbok. Pidgeot, not Pidgeot EX, but Pidgeot Arbok. I'll put this in D. I think it's pretty good. It's super fun. It's super good to play on ladder. I think you'll get a ton of wins. It has a really sound strategy. It's just not that strong, to be honest. Like Arbok really needs, in my opinion, absolutely needs Weezing. It needs that poison. It needs that extra bit of oomph in order to be able to two-shot, because this deck will always be, any Arbok deck will always be a two-shot deck. And I think Pidgeot Arbok decreases its value, whereas if you played it with Weezing, which is the deck we'll talk about next, and I actually think this is C. In Genetic Apex, I probably would have put it more up here. It's an anti-meta deck. It feels very similar to Scolipede. I actually think this deck is better than Scolipede. I am going to put it above. I think Arbok Weezing with Tauros is better than Scolipede Weezing Tauros, to be honest with you. I think it's just a better deck. And I still think it's C, though. I think neither of these decks are good in tournaments, but I think Koga is a better anti-meta deck, and that's the way that these decks kind of feel. And then Wigglytuff. I said it was going to be Weezing, the version with Weezing and possibly Arbok. I think... No, it's better. I think Scolipede is definitely better than that version now. This version here with Weezing and Arbok is plain Tauros now. It no longer needs the Wigglytuff. So if this is just Wigglytuff, Weezing, and maybe even splashing in Arbok as well, I just don't think it's as good. I think 140 HP on a EX Pokemon is really hard to do. For something that's unreliable and hard to load up. Whereas something like a Celby that's 130, yes, it's less, and I just said 140 is unreliable, but this is easier to load up and be completely aggressive with, and this could also sweep games, whereas Wigglytuff can't really do that. So I think that, I definitely think that's, it's bottom of C, I think. And yeah, I'll keep it in C. I think it's better than the rest of the D decks. But let's get back into these lists. I think S, 100%, I agree, I think is absolutely the correct order. Pikachu, Gyarados, and Mewtwo EX. I think this one as well, I feel comfortable with this. I think Exeggutor has won enough tournaments. Exeggutor Celby has won enough tournaments and has the second highest win rate in the game. I think it deserves to be at the top of A. Charizard and Arcanine are just too well tournament winning proven decks that have won and have shown that they're more reliable to win tournaments than the other three under them. Charizard above Arcanine because it has a bit of a higher win rate. And then out of these three decks, they all feel very similar. They all feel like what I call tech box decks with Marshadow and Hitmonlee. And then they all play either Farfetch'd, and then Aerodactyl sometimes will play Primate over the Farfetch'd. I think it has to be Greninja above them because it has the highest win rate in the game. And then I do like the Aerodactyl version because you have more variety. You have multiple versions of the deck, which all do pretty well. And so therefore you have more options in the deck. And then you have the Marshadow, Hitmonlee, and Farfetch'd version, which has a tremendous win rate and does see tops. I think it's good enough to be A. And then this Celby Exeggutor, this has a tremendous, an underwhelming, win rate, even though it does see tops and even though it has won tournaments. Because it has won tournaments, I will keep it at the top of B, even though the Pikachu Raichu builds have a higher win rate. Right now in the current meta, this deck it's still good. I mean, Celby is the main point of this deck, but it's just way better as this version, to be completely honest. So I will keep it at the top of B, and then I'll keep Raichu builds of Pikachu second, and Starmie, and basically any other water deck that involves Starmie, Articuno, and Greninja in some way, shape, or form. I do like in B still. And you can even include Vaporeon versions of decks in this as well. I think it is considered B. It's just not reliable enough to win a tournament. So all three of these decks reliable to get you into tops, but not reliable to win you tournaments. C, this is strong decks that can get you into tops, but aren't reliable to get you enough tops. if that makes sense. These are reliable to get you tops, but not reliable to get you wins. These are reliable to be good, but not reliable enough to get you enough tops often enough. And honestly, I think I'm going to put Gengar up here now instead, now that I figured it out. I think Melmetal is probably the better version of all these decks. It feels very similar to Gyarados. It feels like a budget version of Gyarados because you're playing Druddigon and Greninja, and sometimes you're just playing Druddigon Mew. And I think either way, this deck feels pretty good. You can stop yourself from being one-shotted by a lot of really strong Pokemon because it has 30 HP and takes 20 less damage, and you can play blues in this deck. So I do think it's pretty decent. I will put Blastoise second. You know what? Oh, freaking Blastoise has won a bunch of tournaments, man. I'm going to put Blastoise. I'll put Blastoise, Melmetal. I'll put Pidgeot, and then I'll put Blaine, and then I'll put Gengar, and then Golem, and then we already talked about the three. I think this feels right. Gengar is just not proven enough. I have seen enough Pidgeot, and its actual attack with 140, but Pokeflute's pretty unreliable. But I will say this feels okay. This feels okay to me. And then this is probably the hardest list to tier, the D tier, which is just basically don't bring these to tournaments, only play these on ladder. How do we want to do this? I think I'm going to put Marowak at the top. And the reason why I'm doing this, actually, no, I am going to keep Scorch. Sorry, I said I was going to put Scorch at the top. And because it feels like a budget version of Charizard Arcanine, and that deck is pretty strong. So it's like, basically, like, let's say, for instance, you didn't have 2 Arcanine, and so you couldn't play the Arcanine in your Charizard build. Well, this would be the second best one to play, right? And it would still do very well. So I do think this would be at the top. I'm going to put Marowak in second place here in the D tier because I feel like Marowak EX and regular Marowak can be substituted in these tech box decks. You can basically play, instead of playing 2 Primate lines, you can play 2 Marowak lines. Even without the EX, and then play all the tech cards, Marshadow and Hitmonlee, as well as Farfetch'd in that deck, and then like a one of Marowak EX on top of the 2 baby Marowak, and it still be pretty strong. I honestly do. So again, a budget version of the Aerodactyl. I still think it would do pretty good on ladder, but I don't think it would do as good as the better versions of it in tournaments. What do we want to rank next? That's the hard part. I think I'm going to put Venusaur. I do think Venusaur is very strong. Once it gets online, it's almost impossible to get offline. It is a very specific way to have to play this deck, and I think the superior versions right now, we have seen a couple of tops. I don't think we've seen enough for it to be reliable, but I would put it in the top 3 of this D tier. Next, I think it's probably Alakazam, Weezing. Any Alakazam build, I think the best version of it. See, Alakazam's weird right now because Alakazam, you want to be able to maybe play with Mythical Slab, but I do feel like the best version is the Weezing version. The Weezing Koga version of it. But I do think it's strong. When you bring this to ladder, you can often beat meta decks with it. So I do think it's strong. I just don't think it's consistent and reliable enough. So I will put it 4th. Machamp. I think we'll put Machamp. You know what? No, I'm actually going to put Machamp up here. I'm going to put Machamp here as number 3 because it feels like Golem, but a budget version of Golem. And this deck, if you brought to ladder, would do better than the rest of these decks, in my opinion. So I do think I'm going to put this here. And then I'll put Venusaur, then Alakazam, and then I think we'll do, I want to say, no, we're going to do Brock. I think Brock is really strong. You can play the new Golem or the old Golem. I'm actually going to consider this old Golem, to be honest with you. Old Golem with Onyx, I think surprises a lot of people. I think when people play this, they don't realize that it's actually pretty decent, and that you do get wins with this deck. It's not like you just completely die with this deck and it's completely garbage. And then we'll do, I think, Dragonite. Oh God, Articuno EX. I forgot about this deck. Where do we put this? I think, do we put it up? Do we put it down? How many what do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, we're going to put it right in the middle. Because honestly, I'm not sure. It's such a 50-50 deck. It's such a high roll RNG deck that like you're guaranteed to start with your Articuno EX, but you're not guaranteed to start with a Misty in your hand. So I am going to put it right in the middle. That's what I'm going to decide, is put that right in the middle. I'm going to put Dragonite above Brock, to be honest. And then we'll put Pidgeot, Arbok, and then I'll put Amistar, and then I'll put Florges. So to review this entire list, we got S tier, Pikachu EX, Gyarados EX, and Mewtwo EX. A tier, Exeggutor EX and Celby. We got Charizard EX, we got Arcanine EX, then we got Greninja Tech Box, then we got Aerodactyl Tech Box, and then we got the Standard Tech Box. And then in B tier, we got Celebi Superior without the Exeggutor EX. We got the Raichu build of Pikachu decks, and then we got the Starmie, Articuno, or Greninja decks mixed in with sometimes with Vaporeon. Whatever version you choose to play of any of those 4 cards into a deck together, I consider it B. C tier, we got Blastoise decks because we see them often do strong. They do seem very strong, especially with Druddigon. I think they're way under tested, but I do think they're pretty reliable. I almost want to put it B, but I can't put it there right now. Melmetal decks feels very similar, like a budget Gyarados, but not reliable enough. Pidgeot also feels like a budget version of the Tech Box decks, or even a Gyarados deck when you're playing it with Druddigon. Blaine, we all know what Blaine is. I think it's pretty good deck, but not reliable enough to get you into the tops. Gengar, I'm gonna put Gengar back down here. I'm gonna put him here. So Blaine, Golem, and Scolipede, and any dark deck really all feel very similar in the sense that they've all had their place in the meta. They all have had their place in tops, but they're just not reliable enough to get you there anymore. And Gengar, the same thing. It's just completely under-tested. I don't think enough people have played it, and then you see it get 2 tops in a row in 2 weeks in a row, and then you're like, oh, maybe it is good, but I don't think it's actually that good yet. And then Scorch at the top of D feels like a budget version of the Arcanine Charizard deck. Marowak and Machamp feel like budget versions of the Golem and Aerodactyl decks. Venusaur, just not, you might as well play the Celebi deck, it's just way more reliable. Alakazam and Weezing, I do think is good, just not reliable and not consistent enough. Aerodactyl EX, super duper RNG, but super strong if it goes in your favor. Dragonite EX, if you get this guy online early enough and have no wrong energy pulls in your energy zone, can basically 2-shot your entire board, the opponent's entire board. Brock decks, fun deck, feels like a kind of like a pre-made deck almost that you would get at the store. Our Pidgeot Arbok, super cool strategy. I don't think it's strong enough at all in any way, shape, or form. Amistar decks, as much as I try to make Amistar decks, they just haven't been that good, to be honest. And Florges, again, one of those off-meta cooks that I've tried to build. I think other people have. I've had fun playing it, but I don't think it's strong in any way, shape, or form. But anyways, that is it for the tier list. I hope you liked it. If you agree or disagree, let me know in the comments below. Let me know where else you would put some of these decks if you think they're in the wrong spot or the difference in ordering. And leave a like, subscribe, and share. And as always, keep cooking.